Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. It was almost like heaven was colliding with the earth. Bai Xiaochun's undying emperor's fist engulfed everything in the area, unleashing quintuple his ordinary fleshly body power to create a force that was like a meteor that could destroy the world. Master Cloud Lightning's forefather transformation was similarly a peak-level divine ability, something that could fundamentally alter the structure of one's body. The forefather of all humanity was none other than the legendary ancestor of everyone in the Heavenspan realm. Of course, the forefather's body that was created by this technique couldn't compare at all to the actual forefather. And yet, even a sliver of that forefather's strength could give Master Cloud Lightning the ability to crush everything in his path. As the meteor and the lightning slammed into each other, a huge boom echoed out. A massive shockwave roared out across the vast plain, destroying all of the plants and vegetation it touched. There were also many living things hidden underneath the grass which were transformed into nothing but ash. Many other cultivators in the trial by fire also noticed what was happening. What's going on? Heavens! Those fluctuations! Don't tell me some devas are fighting. But even a fight between devas shouldn't cause fluctuations like that. Everyone was completely and utterly shocked. As for Master Thousand Ghost, he suddenly stopped in place and turned to look back in the direction of the battlefield he had just left, his pupils constricting. Master Cloud Lightning is strong. Everybody knows that. But this Bai Xiaochun, I can't believe he's able to fight back and send out fluctuations like this. A thoughtful look suddenly appeared in his eyes. Meanwhile, in a location near the border between the jungle and the vast plain, Du Lingfei and that strange young man were together with their team, traveling along. They had already explored the desert, the swamp, and the jungle, and were now working on the plain. When the fluctuations reached them, Du Lingfei suddenly turned and looked over her shoulder. "Ignore it," the strange young man said coolly. Not even those shocking fluctuations seemed worthy of his notice. Du Lingfei nodded in response. All she could tell at the moment was that the fluctuations were coming from some distance away. There was no way for her to tell any detailed information about what was happening. Without putting much more thought into the matter, she proceeded along deeper into the plain. As the shockwave rolled out from the point of impact between Bai Xiaochun and Master Cloud Lightning, the lands were ripped to pieces, and a huge crater appeared. As for Bai Xiaochun, blood sprayed out of his mouth as he was flung violently backward. His vision swam and then began to fade, and he could feel stabs of pain throughout his body. He currently felt so weak that he wasn't sure he could even lift his hand. His fleshly body power was mostly drained, but his cultivation base was still in place. Drawing upon its power, he turned into a beam of light that shot off into the distance. His aura was unstable, and his heart was pounding. The backlash from his attack had been significant. Master Cloud Lightning's divine ability had been shockingly powerful, so strong that, for the first time, the undying Emperor's fist couldn't stand up to the force, and had been vanquished. However, Master Cloud Lightning's forefather incarnation had also been crushed. Bai Xiaochun's undying Emperor's fist could destroy someone in the mid-diva realm, and could still be shocking to someone in the late realm. Unfortunately for Master Cloud Lightning, were it not for his misgivings, he could easily have dispelled the attack. But instead, he ended up in worse state than Bai Xiaochun. He was trembling from head to toe, and his combined form was beginning to split apart again. At the same time, strange words were spilling from his mouth. "Brother, let's split apart. From now on, you're you, and I'm me. Little brother, you can't be like this. We're the same person." Master Cloud Lightning felt like he was about to go crazy. When in his combined state, his divine soul was complete. And yet despite that, he still seemed to have split into two parts who were arguing and rejecting each other. At the same time, his body seemed to be going back and forth between wanting to split apart and wanting to stay together. The overall sensation had him hovering on the verge of mental collapse. Finally, he threw his head back and roared, drawing fully upon his secret magic to suppress the second consciousness within him and maintain his combined state. However, his aura was weakening, and he was now barely as powerful as he had been when he had first started the process. "I'm gonna kill you, Bai Xiaochun," he howled, shooting after Bai Xiaochun at rapid speed. Bai Xiaochun gasped at how powerfully Master Cloud Lightning was being affected by the breakup pills. It was a good thing he had concocted such pills to begin with, otherwise, it would have been a terrifying challenge to face the combined Master Cloud Lightning. The man really was too strong after combining, and seemed far too powerful to deal with. Not even my undying Emperor's fist did any good. Don't tell me I'm going to have to use the Godkiller again. The vile repercussions of using the Godkiller technique were almost too painful to think about. Complete and utter bullying. He ganged up on me in the staring contest, and now he's ganging up on me again. He was very displeased by the whole situation, and yet was helpless to do anything about it. It was quite depressing. Damn it, I guess the breakup pill dosage was too low. I need to up the strength. Even as he scrambled to think of what exactly to do next, numerous lightning bolts shot down toward him. Scalp tingling with fear, he dodged out of the way, and then threw out a breakup pill. Master Cloud Lightning's eyes widened, and he leapt off to the side. By now, he truly feared Bai Xiaochun's medicinal pills. This guy's pills are completely malicious, he thought. Obviously, he had long since connected the dots, and come to realize that his current difficulties were because of the medicinal mist that Bai Xiaochun's pills had created earlier. The thought of how Bai Xiaochun's pills could affect him caused his killing intent to grow stronger by the moment. By this point, the chase had led to the border of the plain, where it began to give way to the jungle. Master Cloud Lightning's relentless pursuit had pushed Bai Xiaochun into a state of madness, and he was just preparing to go all out by using his godkiller technique. However, just as he was about to destroy a drop of undying blood, he suddenly saw a group of people off in the distance. He recognized them immediately. Du Lingfei was there, as well as that strange young man, the two of them flanked by a handful of special guards. By now, it had been several months since he had first encountered them. Almost as soon as he caught sight of them, Du Lingfei saw him, and her eyes widened at the sight of Master Cloud Lightning chasing him with murderous intentions. Master Cloud Lightning also noticed Du Lingfei and her group. Having been a diva patriarch in the Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect for many years, he was very well aware of Du Lingfei's status. Even if he were more powerful than he currently was, he wouldn't dare to do anything rash in front of her. Therefore, he slowed down a bit in his pursuit of Bai Xiaochun, although he didn't stop completely. In his opinion, the grudge between himself and Bai Xiaochun was a personal matter, and Heavenspan Island usually didn't interfere in such things. As long as he acted respectfully, he could continue his chase. However, he did prepare a quick explanation. Not forgetting to clasp his hands as he continued to give chase, he addressed Du Lingfei in respectful fashion and said, "Goddess Du, this matter between Bai Xiaochun and myself is..." However, before he could finish his statement, Bai Xiaochun interrupted him with words that nearly caused him to fall out of the sky. "Wifey, save me. Save me, oh my wifey of mine." Then he shot toward Du Lingfei and her group at top speed. His voice rang out loud and clear for everyone to hear, and brimmed with profound passion and sincerity. As soon as Du Lingfei heard Bai Xiaochun's words, her jaw dropped. And there was little need to mention the special guards around her. Their eyes went wide with disbelief as they stared at Bai Xiaochun rushing toward them. As for the young man in the group, he looked at Bai Xiaochun with a cold gaze. However, the shock Master Cloud Lightning felt surpassed the combined shock of everyone else. He was dumbfounded, completely swept away, even more so than he had been by the chaos of the breakup pill. Shivering incredulously, he tried to determine whether or not he had just heard correctly. Stammering, he said, what? What did you just call Goddess Du?" The words Master Cloud Lightning had just heard seemed almost completely impossible. To see him reacting with such fright was very pleasing to Bai Xiaochun. Feeling very proud of himself, he hurried forward until he was right in front of Du Lingfei. Puffing his chest out pompously, he turned to look at Master Cloud Lightning and loudly said, "Didn't you hear what I just said? This is my wifey, HMMMPHH. In that case, do you know who my father-in-law is? Let me make it clear, Master Cloud Lightning. The reason I never mentioned this before is that I, Bai Xiaochun, am the type of person who likes to keep a low profile. But you had to go bully me left and right, leaving me no choice in the matter. I could only ask for my wifey to come save me. By this point, you've probably figured out who my father-in-law is, right? Yeah, exactly. He's the master of Heavenspan Island, the exalted celestial." Bai Xiaochun's words crashed into Master Cloud Lightning like a mountain. His face fell, and his eyes bulged on the verge of popping out of his skull. His mind spun out of control, and his heart began to pound violently in his chest. Never in his wildest dreams could he have imagined that the quarry he had been harrying would have an identity like this, a status and background of such import. The idea that he had been trying to chase down and kill the son-in-law of the Celestial left him completely bowled over. And yet, he still couldn't quite accept the situation. I was just about to catch him. I was just about to put him to death. Why? Why did this have to happen? Master Cloud Lightning felt like his head was about to explode. He wouldn't have believed it was true at all, except that Du Lingfei simply stood there looking shocked, not offering a single word of rebuttal. In fact, What was worse was that a slight flush could be seen on her face as she looked over at Bai Xiaochun, a slight glare visible in her eyes. The look on her face dashed any last strand of hope Master Cloud Lightning had left. Of course, there was no way he could have noticed the strange glint that flashed through the eyes of the young man when Bai Xiaochun mentioned that the Celestial was his father-in-law. Bai Xiaochun was getting more excited at how stunned Master Cloud Lightning looked. At the same time, he wished that he could go on with more information and explain that he also had a demigod for a father-in-law, and that his apprentice was the Hell Emperor. That would probably scare Master Cloud Lightning to death. HMPH, now do you dare to provoke me? The frustration and fear he had felt during the chase had now vanished, to be replaced by joy and delight. He had truly been put into a bad position by Master Cloud Lightning, and had been unable to escape. In fact, he had nearly met his death, only to make a stunning comeback in which he seized the ultimate advantage. Things are not over between us, Master Cloud Lightning, he said proudly, swishing his sleeve. Were it not for the fact that I didn't want to reveal my identity, I would have long since killed you. And yet you repeatedly bullied me over and over again. I will not forget this. You just wait and see what happens in the end. As Bai Xiaochun spoke, louder and louder, Master Cloud Lightning's face drained of blood, and his eyes began to turn blank. To him, it was like existing inside of a dream. I offended the Celestial's son-in-law. He was afraid, truly afraid, so much so that he wanted to cry. After all, the Celestial was basically the emperor of the lands of Heavenspan, which meant that his son-in-law was essentially on the same level as a demigod. Master Cloud Lightning, on the other hand, was a lowly diva, a person who could be disposed of by a mere thought from a person like that. Considering his current mental state, Master Cloud Lightning was incapable of maintaining his combined form. His two halves split apart, and then, ashen-faced and despairing, stepped forward with clasped hands. Bowing, they tried to offer explanations. At around that time, the young man next to Du Lingfei cleared his throat and continued along as he had been before, completely ignoring Bai Xiaochun. Du Lingfei had recovered, and gave Bai Xiaochun an enigmatic smile. Then she turned to Master Cloud Lightning, the smile gone. Looking extremely lofty, she said coolly, "Fellow Taoist Cloud Lightning. Xiaochun loves to play pranks, so don't take him too seriously. In terms of whatever grudge you have with him, the best thing would be to resolve the matter as soon as possible." Her words were spoken in a very formal tone, and seemed to imply that Bai Xiaochun's words from moments ago had been a joke. But Master Cloud Lightning didn't take them that way. After all, he didn't miss the fact that Du Lingfei had addressed him as fellow Taoist Cloud Lightning, but had referred to Bai Xiaochun as Xiaochun. That revealed the truth about everything, and sent a tremor through Master Cloud Lightning. As for Du Lingfei, she was apparently worried that her message hadn't come across clearly enough. Therefore, she walked over to Bai Xiaochun, straightened up his clothing, and then whispered a few words into his ear. Then, she ignored Master Cloud Lightning as she caught up to the young man and the special guards. The matter couldn't have been more clear now to Master Cloud Lightning, whose vision was beginning to go dim from the shock and terror. As for Bai Xiaochun, he simply stood there and blinked a few times. Du Lingfei hadn't said anything special to him moments ago, just to stay safe, and that she still had some important business to attend to. However, he was very pleased with the show she had put on. Crossing his arms, he stuck his chin up and looked arrogantly at the twin Master Cloud Lightnings. The twin Master Cloud Lightnings were feeling completely overwhelmed with bitterness. They exchanged glances, neither of them quite sure about what to do now. They had been caught completely unprepared by this unexpected turn of events. In one moment, they had been shouting in triumph as they closed in for the kill, only to find the situation completely reversed the following moment. Both of them howled with grief in their hearts, extremely displeased with how Bai Xiaochun had blatantly led them on. After all, if they had known the truth from the beginning, they would never have ended up in this horrible situation. This Bai character's true trump card isn't that fist strike, or that blood mist which causes him to lose consciousness. It's not even those weird medicinal pills of his. It's his relationship with the Celestial. What are we supposed to do now? As the twin Master Cloud Lightnings stood there feeling torn about what to do, Bai Xiaochun casually remained in place watching them, arms crossed. Occasionally he would snort coldly, but wouldn't say anything. In that way, he allowed the pressure to build up for the twin Master Cloud Lightnings. Under normal circumstances, they would have just turned and left. But they knew that they had offended Bai Xiaochun too deeply. Now that his identity had been revealed, they had to take their sect into consideration as well. Bai, old pal, that was just a misunderstanding earlier. Yeah, exactly. Ha ha ha. Our Nine Heavens Cloud Lightning sect has been good friends with your Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect for a long time. Both of the twin master Cloud Lightnings felt very embarrassed at this point. Very rarely would they ever give up face in this manner, a fact which was obvious from both their words and the way they pursed their lips. Bai Xiaochun's eyes widened into a glare. Obviously, the twin master Cloud Lightnings were not being very sincere. However, he knew what to say and how to say it. These two were feeling very bitter about their loss, and therefore, it was probably best to quit while he was ahead. He cleared his throat. Very well. Since it was a misunderstanding, there's no need to bicker. However, that little chase of ours left me in pretty bad shape. I also lost a diva soul, as well as a manual for something called the 100 Cloud Lightning Forefather Transformations. Clearing his throat in meaningful fashion, he looked over at the twin master Cloud Lightnings. The twin master Cloud Lightning's hearts crumbled, and inwardly, they cursed Bai Xiaochun for his shamelessness. The divine ability to which he referred was a secret magic from the north, and wasn't something they could simply hand over to him, not even if they were in a passive position like they were now. However, they also realized that if they didn't surrender it, the situation would be difficult to resolve. Therefore, one of the twins produced a crystal from his bag of holding, within which was sealed a diva soul. Oh, you did find my diva soul. As it turned out, the Li Shendao method actually worked quite well. Bai Xiaochun took the diva soul, examined it briefly, then frowned. Fellow Taoists Cloud Lightning, you shouldn't have. Oh, by the way, in addition to the lost diva soul, I also happened to lose a bunch of spirit stones. And 7 or 8 precious treasures. Plus a whole bunch of medicinal pills. With that, he looked up unblinkingly. The twin master Cloud Lightnings felt like they were about to explode. However, they had no choice but to suppress their anger at the excessive demands. Damn it, why couldn't this guy just die? With all the things he supposedly lost, he could fill a whole treasure house. No matter how frustrated they were though, they could only grit their teeth and gather all of the things he had demanded. Bai Xiaochun was feeling quite proud. Just when he was about to continue on in this fashion, the ground suddenly trembled as surely as if an earth dragon were moving about below. Then, a massive, thunderous crash filled the air. The energy released vastly surpassed that which had been released during the fight between Bai Xiaochun and Master Cloud Lightning. By about 10 times, the plain, the jungle, the swamp and the desert, all began to shake violently. Something really big was happening. The entire trial by fire shook violently, including the desert, the swamp, the plain and the jungle. Of the hundreds of nascent soul cultivators who had survived all of the dangers thus far, most had either gotten lucky or possessed extraordinary cultivation bases or intelligence. However, all of them were deeply shaken by what was happening. They weren't the only ones to react in such a way. The other living beings who existed within the trial by fire were trembling at the realization that a huge catastrophe was imminent. Soon, screams and cries began to rise up from within the lands of the trial by fire. What's happening? The lands are quaking, and even the sky is churning. What's going on? By now, most of the surviving cultivators had gathered into groups of 3, 4, or 5. Furthermore, many such groups had already set up methods of communicating with each other. After all, in a dangerous place like this where no one knew what exactly was going on, it was more important than ever to stay abreast of events elsewhere. Therefore, many people began to pull out transmission jade slips and send messages back and forth. Before long, shocking news began to spread. Someone found the exit to the trial by fire. It's in the desert. However, a wall is blocking the way out, and we need to join forces to break through it. It was astonishing news. After all, because of how dangerous this trial by fire was proving to be, many people had already begun to give in to despair. Now that the exit had been found, countless eyes went bloodshot. Some people were still thinking about the prizes at stake, and others just wanted to escape. Either way, all of them began to head toward the desert. Bai Lin, Zhao Tianzhao, and various other powerful experts from the other rivers all began to head in the same direction. Master Thousand Ghost was currently in the swamp when he got the news. His eyes flickered as he suddenly transformed into a mist of ghosts that headed toward the desert, taking Sun Wu, Big Fatty Zhang, and Song Ke with him. In the jungle, Guru Spirit Immortal from the exalted Zodiac Moon Domination sect transformed into a shooting star that split the air in the direction of the desert. On the vast plain, Du Lingfei and her group all looked in the direction of the desert. The young man in the group was clearly very excited, and his eyes began to shine brightly. There it is, at long last. He threw his head back and laughed uproariously, his energy surging, although he kept it suppressed. Finally, he flicked his sleeve, picking the rest of the group up with power far beyond that of a diva as he flew up into the air. In that same moment, a young woman could be seen in the desert, sitting atop a huge sandworm, a broad smile covering her face. She waved her finger at the sandworm, which immediately withered up and transformed into black smoke that she absorbed into her finger. Shockingly, she was surrounded by tens of thousands of sandworms, although instead of their usual vicious deportment, they all were trembling in terror at her aura. I used to raise you little earthworms to feed my 3 ghosts. Who would ever have thought that you would grow up to be so big? A smile spread out across the young woman's fair face. She was none other than Hu Xiaomei. However, if Bai Xiaochun were here to see her, he would immediately recognize that her aura was not that of Hu Xiaomei. Well, I guess it doesn't matter, as long as I'm back. She covered her smile with her hand, and yet, that didn't conceal her bizarre dual pupils. Chuckling, she blurred into motion, heading toward the location of the exit that had been found in the desert. As everyone in the trial by fire stirred into motion, Bai Xiaochun and the twin master cloud lightnings both received messages via jade slip. Someone found the exit. The twin master cloud lightning's eyes went wide. Ignoring Bai Xiaochun, they both turned and blasted off into the distance. The news had come to Bai Xiaochun from Big Fatty Zhang, who, thanks to Master Thousand Ghost, was now able to send messages at a much greater range. Bai Xiaochun looked at the information, and his heart began to thump in his chest. The exit is in the desert? But I went through the whole desert and never found a thing. He suddenly felt bad that he hadn't taken a bit more time to thoroughly search the desert. Well, too late to worry about it now, he thought, sighing. Of course, by this point, everyone in the entire trial by fire would be hurrying in the same direction. Considering how far away he was right now, it didn't seem there would be much of a chance to come out as a winner. Of all the places the exit could have appeared, why did it have to show up in the desert? Wait, no, there should still be time. I have to at least go check it out. Gritting his teeth, he also began to speed toward the desert. As he traveled along, strange things began to happen long before he even got close to the desert. Rumbling sounds echoed out, and a shocking aura began to fill the air. Off in the direction of the desert, the sky had begun to turn yellow, and furthermore, a brilliant light appeared that was apparently some sort of defensive shield. The color of the sky and the defensive shield seemed to be connected in some way. What kind of place is this exit? Why does it have a shield? In almost the same moment that the shield appeared, the swamp, plain, and jungle all began to rot and wither. In the plain, over which Bai Xiaochun currently flew, the grass began to dry up and die, revealing black soil beneath. The living beings that remained in the plain all trembled and passed away. The entire plain was transforming into a land of death. Even the black soil seemed to lose any life that was in it. It began to dry up and crack. Bai Xiaochun was completely shaken by what he was seeing. It wasn't just the plain. Any living beings that remained in the swamp were dying, and the swamp itself was going dry. Cracking sounds could be heard as crevices opened up everywhere. It was also the same in the jungle. It only took a few breaths worth of time for the entire trial by fire, with the exception of the desert, to be transformed into a realm of death. Bai Xiaochun wasn't the only one to be shocked by this. All of the cultivators hurrying toward the desert felt very ill premonitions because of the withering, dying lands around them. What the hell kind of place is this? A powerful aura of death began to fill the air, causing the entire world they were in to begin to grow dark and sinister, as if it were a realm of ghosts. Everything was happening too quickly. Within moments, no clouds were visible in the sky, only turbid darkness filled with the faint images of evil ghosts, who looked down on the land with greed and hunger. Because of how the other 3 areas were withering and dying, the brightly lit desert became more eye-catching than ever. By now, the cultivators flying toward the desert had abandoned all thoughts of becoming some apprentice of the celestial. They just wanted to escape with their lives. Bai Xiaochun was so nervous he was panting. Furthermore, he was actually familiar with this particular sinister aura, although right now he was too flustered to think about that. After a few hours passed, he was in the swamp, continuing on toward the desert, when he noticed something off in the distance. A spot of white light could be seen on the ground, very eye-catching because of the darkness around it. Before, the swamp had been filled with murky liquid and decomposing soil. Because of that, this light hadn't been visible. But now, with the lands withering away, and crevices opening up everywhere, that white light was very conspicuous. What's that? Bai Xiaochun thought, surprised. He changed directions, flying over until he was above the very spot with the light. At that point, the ground shook, shifting the soil to reveal a magical device. It was a copper coin. The instant Bai Xiaochun saw that, His eyes went as wide as saucers, and his mind began to spin. Impossible. Bai Xiaochun hovered there panting, his mind reeling and his heart racing. Never could he have imagined that something like this would happen. It was true that he was shocked by how dangerous the trial by fire had turned out to be, but this new development surpassed anything and everything in terms of how astonishing it was. The truth was that this copper coin left him completely and utterly flabbergasted, to the ultimate degree. Even after a very long moment passed, he wasn't even close to calming down. Eventually, he made a beckoning gesture with his right hand, causing the copper coin to fly up into his palm. Then he looked at it closely, during which time his expression flickered with a variety of thoughts. How is this even possible? He murmured. The copper coin that rested in his palm was none other than the copper coin which had once belonged to Master God Diviner. Engraved on the surface of the coin was his very name, Master God Diviner. Bai Xiaochun clearly remembered the moment in which Master God Diviner lost this coin, and how he had howled in grief. As his fingers closed around the coin, he began to shiver uncontrollably, and think back to the moment when he, Master God Diviner, and Song Ke had been traversing the deadmire. They had been sucked onto the strange bone galleon, whereupon Bai Xiaochun suggested to Master God Diviner that he perform a divination to figure out how to escape. Master God Diviner had pulled out this very copper coin, but had dropped it, whereupon it fell into a crack on the deck of the ghost galleon. Even after descending into the lower decks of the galleon, Bai Xiaochun had never seen the coin again. It had vanished without a trace. But now, here in this trial by fire, he found it. Shivering and shaking, he looked up into the sky, feeling as cold as ice. What is this place? He thought, swallowing hard as he looked at the murky, leaden sky. All of a sudden, an idea popped into his head, an idea which, as he continued to think about it, caused his face to drain of blood. Don't tell me that this trial by fire is actually located inside of that bone galleon? Mind reeling, he tried to convince himself that it couldn't be possible. After all, Heavenspan Island with its trial by fire, and the Deadmire with its bone galleon, were two different locations. No matter how he tried to reconcile it, it seemed impossible to connect the two together. How could the bone galleon and the trial by fire possibly be linked? But the presence of the copper coin seemed to indicate otherwise. If this place is part of that bone galleon, then that could explain why the Celestial sent the cultivators from the Four Rivers here to find an exit. It would also explain that extremely jarring teleportation we experienced. The more he pondered the subject, the more alarmed he became, and the more he came to be convinced that there was a monumental secret tied up within this trial by fire. But what was the secret? The truth was that he actually didn't want to know. He couldn't ever forget what he had seen on deck 3 of that bone galleon. A vanity, with a faceless, one-armed ghostess sitting in front of it. It's a good thing I had great-grandpa Gravekeeper's command medallion to protect me. He absent-mindedly rubbed his bag of holding, where that very same command medallion still resided. At that point, he breathed a sigh of relief. However, the thought of the ghostess still caused his hair to stand on end. Maybe I'm overthinking things, he thought, scowling on the verge of tears. However, it was at this point that he remembered seeing the bone galleon later on in the Deadmire, and realizing that it clearly had more than 3 decks. At that point, his fear grew more intense, and he looked up at the sky again, expression that of disbelief. Don't tell me that we're below deck 3? Not wanting to sit around thinking about the matter, he hurried onward. And yet, he couldn't clear his thoughts. It must be a coincidence. Wait, hold on. If this is really the bone galleon, and the copper coin fell down through a hole in the deck, then that hole should still be there. If I can't find any hole, then it means I'm just thinking too much into it. Taking a deep breath, he cautiously flew straight up into the sky. Feeling so nervous he almost couldn't breathe, he continued upward, higher and higher. He didn't move too quickly, and kept his divine sense spread out around him at all times to look for danger. At the same time, he searched for any holes or rifts that would indicate a passage to another location. However, after searching about for some time, he didn't find any such rift in the murky sky. Gradually, he began to relax a bit. Ha ha ha, I knew it was just a coincidence. Forcing a smile onto his face, he continued to search back and forth for a bit, but didn't find any evidence to support his theory. Even that couldn't fully dispel his suspicions, though. Maybe it's a different coin. Or maybe someone found it and brought it here. Neither option seemed very likely. However, he didn't have any other evidence to work with. So after a bit more thought, he decided that the best thing would be to go see what was happening in the desert. Having made up his mind, he took a deep breath and began to fly toward the desert. But then, a tremor ran through him, and his eyes widened. Face falling, he craned his neck to look at a certain spot up ahead in the sky. Although that spot seemed ordinary in nature, when scanning it closely with divine sense, a rift was clearly visible. It wasn't very large, and it actually flickered in and out of existence. Without getting very close to it and examining it with powerful divine sense, it wouldn't be visible. In fact, to nascent soul cultivators, it wouldn't be detectable at all. Only a powerful diva expert like Bai Xiaochun, who was closely searching the area, would ever notice it. There really is a hole, he thought, his heart starting to pound. He looked at the rift, and then looked down toward the general area where he had discovered the copper coin. After making a quick calculation, he threw the coin down in the same trajectory he guessed it would have fallen if it emerged from the rift. Sure enough, it landed only a few meters away from its original location. His mind began to spin even more violently. It really is the bone galleon, he shrieked. To him, that rift was like a fiendish monster. After all, the bizarre nature of the bone galleon had left a deep and terrifying impression on him. Whether it was the 3 ghost faces on the flags on the deck of the ship, the mural on deck 1, or the skeletons and rocking chair on deck 2, they all left him trembling in fear. There was also how Song Ke and Master God Diviner had lost their minds, and the most nerve-wracking thing of all, the ghostly mother on deck 3. Bai Xiaochun was absolutely certain that, without the Gravekeeper's command medallion, he would have most certainly died on the bone galleon. The thing about accepting a new apprentice was a complete smokescreen. The Celestial obviously had some other reasons for bringing the cultivators of the 4 rivers here to help him find the exit. He obviously couldn't get onto the bone galleon by going into the Deadmire, thus the use of teleportation. Furthermore, he apparently didn't dare to just come here by himself. All the evidence points to the conclusion that he wants something inside the bone galleon and is using the lower-level cultivators to get it. In turn, that means that the Celestial has been in the trial by fire all along. Shivering, he thought back to the young man who had been traveling with Du Lingfei. Back when I slapped that guy across the side of the head, I could tell that he didn't feel like a demigod. Sweat began to pour down his face. I actually slapped the Celestial. Wait, if the Celestial is here, then that means Gongsun Wanner is probably here too. The only person Bai Xiaochun feared more than the Celestial was Gongsun Wanner. All of a sudden, he had no desire whatsoever to get out of the desert. He needed to find Big Fatty Zhang and his other friends, and then hide somewhere until the dust settled. Even as he came to this conclusion, a mysterious and sinister voice suddenly echoed out from the rift he had just discovered. Now that you're here, why don't you come in and look around? After all, this isn't your first time aboard. Bai Xiaochun let out a yelp of shock, then began to stammer, this is a misunderstanding. That's all, a misunderstanding. I took a wrong turn. Even as Bai Xiaochun attempted to flee, a powerful gravitational force emerged from the rift. It didn't affect the air, or the ground below, or anything else in the entire world. Neither did it emit fluctuations that would be noticed by anyone else. However, it did exert massive force on Bai Xiaochun, so much so that it felt as if his soul and cultivation base would be ripped out of him. He could struggle against it, and perhaps escape, but in the process, his soul would be torn away from him and swallowed up by the rift. To Bai Xiaochun's horror, he found that it was the same with his cultivation base, and even his blood. In fact, as he struggled, blood began to ooze out of his pores and fly through the air toward the rift. It seemed like he might be torn to pieces at any moment. At the same time, though, the sinister, female voice continued to speak into his ear, describing what she clearly envisioned to be a most wonderful image. By all means, keep struggling. That will make it easier for me to absorb your divine soul and your blood, and eventually, the only thing left behind will be a skeleton. Save me some effort. Help me turn you into a most delectable feast. Bai Xiaochun screamed inwardly as he suddenly visualized himself, with his divine soul sucked away, his cultivation base gone, bereft of blood, flesh, internal organs, and even his head. The only thing left behind was a skeleton which crashed down onto the ground, held in place only because it was made of undying bones. Years later, a passerby would be overjoyed to find such a precious treasure, and would turn his skeleton into medicinal pills, or a magical item, or perhaps even a skeleton puppet. No. Slowly, his mind went blank because of the intense gravitational force. Soon, the power reached a point that defied imagination, and in despair, he stopped struggling. At that point, he became a streak of bright light that shot into the rift. With Bai Xiaochun gone, the rift closed up and disappeared. The entire time, nobody noticed what had occurred, neither Du Lingfei nor the young man with her, both of whom were trying to break through the shield of light in the desert. Also near that shield was Hu Xiaomei, her eyes gleaming with anticipation, but her brow slightly furrowed as she looked off in the direction of the swamp. A moment later, the shield in the desert trembled as though it might collapse, and Hu Xiaomei looked over at it, the anticipation in her eyes growing more intense. At long last, I can return. I wouldn't be doing this unless there were no other choice, Ghost Mother. I very much look forward to the joy on your face when you see me again. As the shield shook violently back in the desert, Bai Xiaochun's vision was finally growing clear, revealing a very familiar scene. He was in a room that looked very much like a lady's bedchamber. There was a bed covered in dust and cobwebs, a vanity, and a cracked mirror. A scream escaped his lips, and he spun to leave, only to find that there was no exit in sight. Seated at the vanity was a woman in a long, red gown. Her back was to him as she combed her hair and softly sang that familiar, spine-tingling song. Tears of terror threatened to spill out of Bai Xiaochun's eyes. What do I do? What do I do? He thought. He felt like his scalp was about to explode, and wished for nothing more than to escape. And yet, there didn't seem to be any way to do that. Without any hesitation, he pulled out the Gravekeeper's command medallion and gripped it tight in his hands. Don't eat me, big sis, he blurted in a quavering voice. Not quite sure of what to say, he began to babble a bit. Do you know the Gravekeeper? He's my master. You and I are probably on the same team. Oh, right, there are some people outside who mean you harm, big sis. Why don't you go check the situation out? No need to worry about me. I didn't want to come here. You dragged me here, big sis. It was at this point that the woman's shoulder moved, as though she were about to turn and look at him. Don't look back, he shrieked. Just, don't look back. If you have anything to say, you can. In the middle of his sentence, the woman stopped singing. Continuing to comb her hair, she quietly said, This is your first time here, huh? He replied. Then, he began to nod his head vigorously. If you say it's my first time here, big sis, then of course it's my first time. Now that you're here, the woman said, her voice undulating in bizarre fashion, I can't help but wonder what you're thinking about as you stand there. A look of confused surprise appeared on Bai Xiaochun's face. Wait, first time? No, this is my second time. And you're the one who brought me here. Nobody brought you here. And your two friends are still right above us. She waved her finger at the mirror, causing an image of the Bone Galleon's deck 2 to appear. There, Song Ke and Master God Diviner stood on either side of the rocking chair, completely unmoving, blank looks on their faces. The image, combined with the woman's words, struck Bai Xiaochun like a thunderbolt, causing him to gasp. Impossible. How could this be happening? I left this place. I went back to the river-defying sect. I went back to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. I was in a trial by fire. That's how I got here. Not only did he not trust the woman's words, he refused to believe that everything that had happened after he left the Bone Galleon, including the events in the river-defying sect and the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, were all mere fantasies. And yet, there was something strange about the woman's voice which made it almost impossible to control his mind, and forced him to start thinking about the past. As he did that, he unknowingly began to relax his grip on the command medallion. You never left, the woman continued in her bizarre voice. Her shoulder trembled, and she slowly began to turn her head. However, she didn't stop combing her hair. In fact, she started combing it faster and faster. She almost seemed to want to rip the hair out of her head. It was a bizarre scene that left Bai Xiaochun feeling profoundly shocked, but at the same time, somewhat blank. Anyone who looks at my face will descend into a fantasy of their own making. This really is your first time here. However, it is not your first time seeing my face. As she spoke, her head continued to turn. Within moments, she would be facing him directly. Bai Xiaochun's face was completely blank, and he was shivering. As he descended into chaotic memories, his grip on the command medallion loosened. The command medallion dropped to the ground, and the woman turned completely around. Her face was featureless, to the point where it almost looked like a blank sheet of white paper. But then a slit spread out on her face, which opened into something like a bizarre mouth. Then she lunged toward Bai Xiaochun as if to swallow him. In that moment, Bai Xiaochun suddenly stooped down and picked up the command medallion. When he looked up, his expression wasn't blank at all, and he was shoving the command medallion out toward the mouth. Since you're scared of this thing, let's see if you dare to eat it. Everything from moments before had been an act. He had decided to throw caution to the wind and create an opportunity for himself. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.